with the eagle eye. All right, now, how about now, Sue?
Okay. So this is an update on staffing for VSBA, and just wanted to let everyone know Phil Gore's last day with VSBA is going to be March 17th. That is quickly approaching, and we'll at the end of the meeting we'll give Phil some well wishes for his departure, and we're all going to miss him very much. And we'll definitely tell him that. We have conducted first round interviews to fill the position of Director of Board Services, and we have 3 candidates who are going to come back for second round interviews on March 14th. So we are very, very hopeful that we'll be able to fill the position soon after that. And we're really happy to have 3 strong candidates to do these second interviews with. And the plan is it's going to be a sort of a they have a task for the second interview to do a presentation to us, and that's going to be part of the interview. So it should be fun. We anticipate that there's going to be a gap in staffing between March 17th and through mid to late April, because most likely whoever we decide to make a job offer to is going to need to give at least 2 weeks notice where they are now, because they're all, employed. So in preparation for that, we're going to have this gap. In preparation for that, Sandra is going to take on some new responsibilities that I listed in your packet. And in order to add this additional work to Sandra, we're going to shift some work to Kara Zimmerman, who is our legislative analyst, starting the week of March 13th. And I have in your packet the work that will be shifting to Kara. And that will cause us to have to increase Kara's hours, since she's going to get some more responsibilities. And in your packet, I have the information about the cost of that, which I don't think necessarily needs board approval, because it does fit within our budget. So I think, and the cost is about $2,250. So that is, just wanted to keep you all informed about that. The Director of Board Services position is going to be vacant during most of that transition period, we anticipate. And then we may also contract some small project-based tasks to Susan Holson, who formerly worked for the VSBA. I'm going to be talking with her tomorrow evening about that. And the projects that she might work on are things like our first year board member training. Like, that's a very concrete project that we could have Susan work on to make sure that that is up and ready to go when it's scheduled, and that we don't put too much pressure on our new person to have something that large of a task done in a very short amount of time. And then at the April board meeting, we're going to return to you with a detailed proposal for a permanent 5th position at VSBA starting May 1st and continuing the position into FY24. The reason I did not do that today is because I'd like to have at least a draft budget for FY24 with that included, so that you can see what that would look like. So this is just a continuation of the discussion that we started last board meeting, and I'll come back in April with a lot more information and numbers for you. And we already have a job description written up, but I did not include it in this packet. I thought it would be more appropriate to include it in April. So that is the staffing update.
Any questions from board members on the staffing update? Not seeing any. So with that, we will move right along in our agenda to, as I said, we're going to skip the board training conflict of interest. That'll come back to us in April when Terry is feeling better. We'll move on to item number 5, which is the legislative update. Hopefully board members got a chance to read the weekly update, but I'm going to turn it over to, I think, Sue, yes, for some more detail.
Yes. I'm going to cover 3 areas and Sandra is then going to cover 3 additional areas. So the first area I'm going to cover is the public funds to private schools, which is S66, H258, and DR 23-0910. Luckily, S66 and H258 are pretty much the same, so there's not 2 separate explanations of those. It's just I'll cover both of them at the same time. They outline one approach that Vermont could take to how Vermont's voucher system for students in school districts that do not operate their own public schools could work in light of the Supreme Court's Carson v. Macon decision. You all know about that decision and what the ruling was. The bills maintain the role of Vermont's historic academies, which are Burn Burton, Linden Institute, St. Johnsbury, and Thetford Academy. And some of the highlights are current law allows districts that do not maintain public high schools to designate up to 3 schools to serve students in any district. And as introduced, these 2 bills require districts that do not maintain a high school or an elementary school to designate up to 3 schools. The number 3, which comes from current law, could be increased by the legislature if that was determined to be necessary to respond to grade configuration or geographical considerations for certain school districts. It also maintains the process in current law that allows a parent or guardian to request that the school board pay tuition to a public school other than those that have been designated. And then it has criteria about whether a school would be eligible to be designated. And that includes a public school in Vermont, a public school located outside of Vermont, or a recognized independent school that meets at least 3 of 4 criteria. And each of the 4 historic academies meet either 3 or 4 of those criteria. I guess the last thing I would say about those 2 bills is they provide a transition period for students that are currently enrolled in private schools until the student graduates or until 2028, whichever comes first. Next is the House Committee Bill, which is called DR 23-0910. That's a draft bill now, so it doesn't have an official bill number yet. It takes a different approach to the issues raised in Carson v. Macon by mandating that private schools meet specific requirements in order to be approved as eligible to receive public tuition. The committee bill was released last Friday, and so still really taking a look at it to understand it. It was released Friday, and of course now the legislature's on their town meeting break. Under House Rule 40C, the committee bill does not have to meet the crossover deadline, which is March 17th. So wanted to let all of you know that because I was curious about that. So I looked up the rule. And that is a rule that since we're in the first year of the biennium, that's why it doesn't have to meet that crossover deadline. There's a different rule when you're in the second year of the biennium. The committee bill includes the following. It has requirements to be approved as eligible to receive public tuition. And those requirements are agree to enroll any student who requires special education services, accreditation by ASNE or NEASC, have to agree to report 3 or more unexcused absences by a student attending the school on public tuition to the student's local education agency, agree to report the academic progress of students attending the private school on public tuition to the student's local education agency, and adopt and implement policies and procedures to comply with the Vermont Public Accommodations Act and the Vermont Fair Employment Practices Act. And then also attest on or before August 1 of each year to compliance with all statutory requirements for approved independent schools and the state board rules on approved independent schools. And then it has some consequences of non-compliance with those requirements. It specifically states that it does not create a private right of action against an approved independent school for failure to comply with any requirements in the bill. Instead, it authorizes the state board to revoke, suspend, or impose conditions on the eligibility of the school to receive public tuition. The entities to which a school district can pay tuition have been amended, and they include a public school, an approved independent school located in Vermont, an approved independent school meeting education quality standards, a therapeutic school. There's a couple other listed, tutorial program. And then this is one to pay attention to, an independent school in another state located within 25 miles of Vermont border and approved under the laws of that state. And then it has some conditions that have to be met regarding non-discrimination in the other state. So right now, money can go out of country. It can go to anywhere in the world. So this would limit it to 25 miles of the Vermont border. It also adds a definition of a therapeutic approved independent school. It has a transition period for out-of-state attendance for those students that are in out-of-state schools that are more than 25 miles beyond the border. It also has a moratorium on the approval of new approved independent schools, prohibits the board from making any of those approvals until further direction from the General Assembly. And I think this is the last provision. Yes, it is. It requires the Agency of Education to provide the House and Senate committees on education with a detailed proposal for a public tuition student advocate position. So that is those are the three bills regarding public tuition for private schools. And would you like me to pause there before I go on to the school safety bill?
Yeah, why don't we pause there, because I see a couple of hands up. So I'm going to go to Mark Clough.
I just wanted to comment about the political pressure that's coming from the independent schools. The sentiment in our area is running 80-20 to the independent schools, and it's all about messaging. They're not understanding the nuances around this. The chair of the St. Johnsbury public school, who has the Avery Inn down in Fairleigh where we go, wrote a long editorial in the paper about how we have to support St. J Academy, and this is going to wreck independent schools. And he just doesn't get it. And his superintendent doesn't dare write anything, but she's noticing where the academy has expelled kids and not even let her know. I know that's in the legislation now, but so I don't know who this is important to outside of the districts where these independent schools are, but they're contacting their legislators like crazy about this, with not all the facts. We tried to clear them up at town meeting, but half my board's employed by the academy, and so that didn't go real well. Scott Beck, the legislator, is sending out messaging from his legislative email. And I kind of called him on that when I saw it on Monday. So I got to tell you, the pressure is unbelievable on this. I did get our superintendent to write a good editorial in our paper explaining the equity issues and that sort of thing, and that nobody's trying to close independent schools. So I guess I tell you that just so you know, Sue, when you're over there, they've pushed back hard, right? And of course, French came out with his statement on Friday, which was brutal. So anyway, that's just information.
No, thanks, Mark. That's helpful. Dan MacArthur, go ahead. Dan with the cat, go ahead.
I got the cat, yes. Yeah. So slightly different perspective on it. I've actually written something up here, which I'll just read. It just won't take too much more time than Mark just took. But I find myself conflicted about the use of public dollars for secondary education in my town, and I will be relaying my thoughts as a local board member to my representative and senators. Marlborough is a tuition town for all of our students grades 9 through 12. It's been very much appreciated by parents and not just parents with money, but for example, the Compass School in Bellows Falls accepts students for just about the amount of tuition that we pay. And I have seen many students from Marlboro flourish at this and other private schools who were simply floundering in the local public schools. I know this is the broad, argument between tuition and not, but I just wanted to let you know that this is kind of where my head is right now. And it's probably going to be someone in conflict with the VSBA, but I want to express it. Marlboro's situation is also different than many small schools. The only high school in our supervisory union is the farthest away of any of the public school options. Very few students over the years have chosen to go to Leland and Gray, partially because it's so far away. By far the majority of our kids go to Brattleboro or Wilmington. We are not members of the supervisory union at either one of those. We have no voice in how the schools operate, no seat at the table. We send off our tuition dollars to them and have no representation. And relative to the proposed legislation, not 66, but the second set that you were talking about, Sue, I do not think that the requirements for a private school to receive public dollars should be any more difficult to achieve than what the 4 academies are being asked to do. We should have oversight and compliance from the schools that get public dollars, but these schools, the local private ones, as I have said, have done wonderful things for Marlboro students over the years. And on this issue, I find myself speaking on behalf of Marlboro parents. So anyway, thanks for just letting me kind of put that out there. It's a, just looking at all this legislation coming down and realizing that this is a very, very much appreciated facet of public tuition dollars in my town.
Thanks, Dan. I'm going to go to Michael Inners next, but I just want to take a brief moment just to do a level set with the VSBA board members, right? So you definitely all got the opportunity to talk about this, but I want to remind folks, right? We had a resolution on this, and VSBA does have a position, and I certainly appreciate, Mark and Dan's individual positions on this, but I want to make sure that folks are keeping that in the context that when you represent VSBA, your position is the VSBA's position, okay? Michael Inners.
Yeah, there's no question that they're playing the political game a lot more aggressively than we are. And I don't know where that factors into our planning, but yeah, I've certainly been a lot of misrepresentation along the way, and at least now Dan French kind of is flushed out into the open on his position. That's just not surprising, but what I expected. But it's now kind of in the open. One kind of question about the alternative bill, because I think that one may have more legs than the other bills that are floating around. There's some really good provisions in it that I liked hearing. Transparency on the finances I didn't hear. And that's a big concern of mine. If we're giving in public money, that the finances are also more visible to us. So I didn't hear that. Did I just miss it, or was it just something you didn't list, or is that actually in the bill or not?
No, it's not in there.
Okay, that's a concern of mine. Is that there's some window into the finances of where we're sending the money?
Thank you, Michael. Mark Kaufman, you're next.
Just a question on definitions and terms within the bills that are being proposed. At least 3 other states in the country are requiring private religious schools to be included in this type of legislation. Is that a consideration here in Vermont? Or is it just assumed that they will be included under an approved independent school? That's it.
Yeah, so if they're an approved independent school, then this would apply to them because of the Carson v. Macon decision.
Thank you.
Mark Schauber.
Dan, I'm sorry for what I'm about to say. The narrative that some children do really well in these private schools is very true. I have no doubt about that. But the problem is that what we're doing is lowering the quality of our public schools at the expense of those few students. And that's one of my biggest concerns. So sorry, Dan, you triggered me. I had to say something.
Okay. Not seeing any other hands, so if you wanted to move on with the other items in the legislative update.
Yes, next I am going to cover school safety. That's a shorter explanation. The Senate Education Committee has been working on DR 23-0756 to address school safety. The bill proposes to require public schools to adopt a policy requiring biannual options-based response drills, which are also called active shooter drills. Second, approved independent schools have to conduct biannual options-based response drills following the template developed by the Vermont School Safety Center. Next, public schools have to adopt all hazards emergency operations plans and an access control and visitor management policy. It says approved independent schools need to adopt access control and visitor management procedures, and that both public and approved independent schools need to create a behavioral threat assessment team. Senate Education was working on version 6.1 of this bill at the end of last week, and they had incorporated the concept of trauma-informed best practice guidance for the option-based drills. And they are expected to complete their work on the bill ahead of the policy bill crossover deadline, which is March 17th. So that is the school safety bill.
And I see a hand up, Sue. If we just take a quick pause, I'm going to go to
Okay.
Gaston.
Hey, thanks, Sue. The only question I have is that, I mean, I was really struck with this list of 6 proposals here, and they go between public schools and independent schools. It just seems odd to me that independent schools, approved independent schools, have to do exactly what public schools have to do, except for item number 3, which is to adopt all hazards management policy. So the question is, what exactly is that? And why would a public school be held to reviewing that and having that on its, policies, and not an independent school, when in fact safety doesn't stop at the curb if you're an independent school? I don't understand it. Over.
Thanks, Gaston. We actually asked a similar question to the committee and pointed that out. It's an all hazards emergency operations plan, and it's very comprehensive. They have to anticipate like any type of hazard that could occur, which, as you can imagine, would be quite a large list. And I don't know, I thought that the committee heard us and was planning to require that for all schools, but apparently right now they still have not made that change. So I'm not sure why that change hasn't been made.
Great, thanks, Sue, and I'm glad that you picked up on it and brought it up. Over. Thank you.
Any other questions on this topic before we move on? Not seeing any, Sue. Oh, wait,
Okay.
hang on. David Chandler popped
I
in.
do, yes, I'm sorry. I do have a quick question is what is lacking in the current law that this proposed law will provide?
Well, that would be a good question for your Senator Campion. But I think what these things aren't in current law. The requirement for an options-based drill is not in law. There are some schools that are doing it, some that are not. And the Agency of Education has really been pushing for this. So Dan French would be another person to ask, but the reason that the agency has put forth is that they think that it's not good to have a patchwork across the state with differing levels of protection, and that all schools should have this. So some schools are doing some of these things already. The Slate Valley School District, for instance, is probably the foremost in the state on all of this because of things that have happened there in the past. They're very ahead of the game as far as safety goes. But not all districts, for instance, already have an all hazards emergency operations plan or do options-based drills.
Michael Inners, go ahead. You're still muted though, Michael.
Sorry, what does the behavioral threat assessment program actually require?
The bill, well, I'm not sure I need to look at the latest version of the bill to see whether they have specific positions listed. The initial version of the bill listed specific people that needed to be on that threat assessment team. And that one of the concerns was that not every district had all of those people. So then they changed it, I believe, in another version to be a little more, to take out that level of specificity. And I think I remember that it's back in there again. So that is something that is very new and that a lot of districts don't have yet, which is this behavioral threat assessment team.
I guess what's it supposed to assess? I mean, I guess if I'm
So
this could be a lot
my
of things.
understanding, yeah, my understanding of it is that it is supposed to identify students or situations that may cause some type of threat to the school and be able to proactively address the situation before it gets to be at a crisis point.
Does it require anything like subscribing to these social media monitoring companies or anything?
I don't believe that the current bill has anything like that in it. It may be that is recommended by the Vermont School Safety Center, because the bill does require basing some of the practices on the recommendations of the Vermont School Safety Center. So it may be that it's not in the bill, but that it's in the recommendations or the templates of the Vermont School Safety Center.
Any other questions on school safety? All right, I think we can move on, Sue.
Okay, this is my last one, and then Sandra's going to do 3. I'm doing next the school construction bill, which is DR 23-0951. And that bill proposes to create a school construction aid task force to examine, evaluate, and report on issues relating to school construction aid. It's proposed to be a 13-member task force, and it would include legislators, the state treasurer, the Secretary of Education, the executive directors of Vermont NEA, Principals Association, VSBA, VSA, and the Municipal Bond Bank. And it would also include representation from the Vermont School Custodians and Maintenance Association, a person with expertise in historic preservation, a person with expertise in the construction industry, specializing in school facilities projects, and a member of the American Industrial Hygiene Association. The task force would review the results of the statewide school facilities inventory and conditions assessment and the school construction funding report. And it would also study issues related to school construction aid, including first, the needs, both programmatic and health and safety of statewide school construction projects. Second, funding options for statewide school construction projects, including any incentive plans. Third, a governance structure for the oversight and management of a school construction aid program. And fourth, criteria for prioritizing school construction funding. The task force will be required to submit a written report by January 15th, 2024. And the Senate Education Committee voted the bill out of committee on last Friday. And after the town meeting break, the bill is going to be introduced and assigned a bill number, and then it's going to head to Senate appropriations. And lastly, under the school construction heading, I'll just give you also a little bit of an update on PCB testing and remediation. So the House and Senate Education Committees have been hearing updates from involved state agencies and representatives of school districts about the PCB sampling and remediation requirements that were established in 2021. And under those requirements, in January of this year, the administration filed 2 reports. One was an overview of PCBs in schools program, and the other was PCBs in schools funding report. You can find these linked in the legislative report that we issued on Monday. So in that report, the administration is proposing a cost share split for necessary work by school districts with actionable levels of PCBs. And that split would be 80% state, 20% local on a first come, first served basis with caps on reimbursement. In a joint hearing before both of the education committees on Tuesday, February 28th, local school officials testified on their district's experiences navigating this program, and also about the shortcomings of the cost share allocation and the capping proposal for a program that was state mandated, state controlled, rapidly enacted, and very complex. The witnesses were Mark Tucker for Caledonia Central Supervisory Union, Sherry Sousa and Raphael Adamek for Windsor Central Supervisory Union, Renee Sanchez for the Champlain Valley School District, Frank Rucker for Wyndham Southeast Supervisory Union, and Neil Odell for the Vermont School Boards Association. So legislative considerations for appropriate funding models for the PCB program are ongoing, and we're keeping a close eye on that. And Neil's testimony is linked in the legislative report, so you can read it there. So that's the end of my report, and I'll toss it over to Sandra unless anybody has any questions on school construction or PCBs.
I see Gaston has a question.
Yeah, again, thanks, Sue, for this. The question that I have is about the PCB testing and remediation. Why is it that the decision was made to put this funding on a first come, first served basis? And here's why I asked the question. It seems to me that that favors your larger schools who are able to take budget surpluses from previous years, right, with the approval of the electorate, of course, and they can build up their funds such that when PCB remediation work needs to be done, they have the funds immediately available. Whereas a school district such as Troy, who does not have a very rich or deep pocket, school maintenance fund, or you know what I mean, where we're not going to be able to react as quickly. We're going to have to wait, put it into a budget in the subsequent year, and by that time the money will be all gone. So I don't understand how it is that they've come up with that, or if that's just a ship that's left the port and that's just the way it is. Over. Thank you.
No, I don't think the ship has left the port, Gaston, and the testimony, that the committees heard on February 28th pointed out the inequities and the problems with first come, first serve, and also with the 80-20, arguing for full state coverage of this. So I don't know where they're going to end up, but they're certainly still discussing it. So it's certainly something to contact your legislators about.
Great. Thanks, Sue.
Laura, go ahead.
Similarly, in the construction aid task force, is that set? I really do not understand why we need another study they did a couple of studies last year. Norm had one. I sat with Norm, with the Secretary French and all that. I just do not understand why we need another study. And there were programs before at the Agency of Education, so I haven't been following the testimony, so I don't know if this is a position that's going to be filled at the Agency of Education. What we need is mobilization of funds and getting things done. And similar to what Gaston was saying, the bigger districts, including my district, we can mobilize faster because we have bigger central offices that can advocate and do what they need to do. And the smaller rural school districts are at a disadvantage. So, but in any event, I do not understand why we need another study. We need to set the funding, set a program, not another study. It's my frustration.
Yeah, totally understand that frustration, Floor.
Yeah, there's a pattern, there's a
like study.
system that has been done before. It's just, we don't need another study. It's a waste of money and it's a waste of resources of you or, all of these people that have limited time too, that have to now sit in a committee. Sorry, that's
okay. I'm going to go to Adrian first, and then we'll go to Michael.
I just had a clarification question that maybe I missed something. So are they only making available funds for the PCB remediation one time and it's first come, first serve? Because not all of us are even on the testing schedule yet.
I would have to look at the report to know if it was one time, Adrian. I'm not sure about that, but I know the testing schedule, if you haven't tested yet, then,
Yeah,
you wouldn't be applying.
We
yet.
haven't been required to yet. We're like another year off.
Yeah, I think it's because they have they don't know how much it's all going to cost, and they have a certain amount of money, and so they're looking for a way to allocate it. And they, I hope, understand that they might need to allocate more money in the future.
Yeah, it just seems absolutely crazy that, okay, the first schools that test get money and the rest of you will,
Thanks, Adrian. Michael, Innes, go ahead.
I had the same point as Adrian, where we've got schools that are late on the testing cycle. And it just seems completely unfair to those schools that by the time they test, it's going to be too late to even apply if the money's all gone.
Yeah, so I think the good news is all the points that folks are making here were the exact same points that were made in front of that committee when we and the others testified. So I'm reassured to know that we're all on the same page on this, essentially. If there's nothing else, then I think we will turn it over to Sandra.
Hi, sorry, had a hard time with my mute button. So I'm going to start with the Universal Meals Bill, which is H-165. It's in the House. As drafted, it would make universal meals. You might remember this year, universal meals are being provided by funds at the state level for 1 year. This H-165 would make universal meals permanent, breakfast and lunch. And the funding would right now, as drafted, come off the top of the Ed Fund. The current draft expands to include approved independent schools and nonprofit pre-qualified private pre-kindergarten providers that are not also an approved or recognized independent school to be eligible for universal meals supplement if it operates a food program under a public school food authority. School districts would be required to maximize federal funding in order to be eligible for universal meals supplement. And although H-165 started in House Ag, it's now in House Ways and Means, where they're talking about cost and potential funding sources. Right now, the bill does not include a dedicated funding source, and if it's implemented without one, the Joint Fiscal Office estimates an increase in both homestead and non-homestead property taxes at a rate of 3 cents each. So that's where we're at with the universal meals. I'll pause. See if there's any questions there.
Any question on meals?
Okay.
Not seeing any.
All right. The next bill that I'm going to talk about is S56 that addresses childcare and early education or pre-kindergarten. Senate Health has been taking up S56 since the start of the session, quite a bit of testimony on this topic. It's a very large and complex bill. The current draft 3.1 is a strike all amendment, which removes all language relating to the public pre-kindergarten proposal and instead includes a placeholder in section 1 where language developed by Senate Ed would actually be inserted into the S56 bill. So Senate Ed has been working on taking testimony around what that language might look like, and it would address a pre-kindergarten study. Senate Ed has also been working on language for a study that would be done by the Agency of Education to address the topic of providing public pre-K tuition vouchers for students to attend programs in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and New York, and the language requiring the AOE to evaluate public and private pre-kindergarten education standards and regulations for out-of-state pre-kindergarten education is currently drafted in the Senate Miscellaneous Education Bill, but there was mention that the two topics may be placed together in the end when it all gets sorted out. So two things happening for pre-K right now. Any questions on that one?
Board members? Sandra, you're really doing a great job tonight because you're answering everybody's questions before they even have them.
Sue had the hard ones. And then the last two I'm going to go over are the miscellaneous education bills. So in the Senate, it's a draft committee bill 230909. It's very much a draft bill and it proposes several things. So I'll run through the bulleted list pretty quickly here. It addresses some language around compensation and staffing for the State Board of Education. It would require a written report from the AOE to both House and Senate Education Committees detailing the breadth of course offerings for grades 6 through 12 across the state and the differences between those offerings. A proficiency-based learning study committee to study proficiency-based learning and proficiency-based graduation requirements. An evaluation by the AOE regarding what I just talked about with the out-of-state pre-kindergarten potential. An expansion of the reporting requirements of the existing working group of the status of libraries in Vermont. And to establish a model regional student driver ed clinic program to provide the required 6 hours of behind the wheel instruction by a certified driver ed instructor. There is an appropriation of $200,000 in the bill. Right now, the language says that appropriation would come from the transportation fund, but the AOE believes that's not, they don't support that and have recommended that that would come from the ed fund. The House bill is H461. It was approved out of the House Education Committee on March 1st, and it's currently on the House notice calendar for second reading. There's 4 topics in that bill, and it does 1, suspend the implementation of the shared school district financial system. 2, allow the National Guard tuition benefit to be used at non-Vermont approved post-secondary schools. 3, make changes to the home study program. And 4, extend recommendations and reporting requirement deadlines for the Vermont Ethnic and Social Equity Standards Advisory Working Group. So those are your miscellaneous ed bills at this time.
I will go to Dan MacArthur first.
Yeah, I was interested to see this, Sandra, the mention of some oversight of the State Board of Ed. I have often wondered why we even have a State Board of Ed. Does the VSBA have an official stance on that? They seem to do nothing but create chaos from my perspective.
I don't think we have a resolution specifically on this. Am I right, Sue?
There is a resolution. I don't know that it's specifically on this. I will take a look. I think it talks about the role of the Agency of Education and the state and possibly the state board, but I'll look into that. Well, you have another question, I can look into that.
Sure, why don't we give you that time? Mark Kaufman, go ahead. Oh, Mark, you're still muted though.
My apologies. This goes back to part of what Flora was saying. We're going to establish another study committee for proficiency-based education and graduation requirements. just in the last year, there have been hundreds of peer-reviewed articles based on thousands of hours of research across the United States and Western Europe that I'm aware of, talking specifically about proficiency-based education and integration within current educational models. Is this study committee or this study group going to do a meta-analysis of other people's work, or are we going to recreate from the ground up within the state of Vermont? That's it.
Thanks, Mark. I'm assuming a rhetorical question that necessarily didn't need an answer. I think we all understood where you were coming from, though.
I can say that we testified, I testified based on the legislative committee's recommendation that it wasn't the right time to do this, and that we didn't need the study committee, but apparently it's still in there. I do have the resolution regarding the role of the state in education. You want me to read that, Neil?
Yeah, please.
So it says the VSBA believes that the role of the State Board of Education and the State Agency of Education is 1, to guide the creation of a broad design for the education system in a rapidly changing world where information is no longer confined to books or geographic locations. The broad design must include a focus on assuring success for every student, supporting a new vision for teaching and learning, engaging and supporting families and communities, delivering and using world-class technology, and providing effective leadership. 2, to provide support for local boards in their efforts to design and implement the best possible educational program. 3, to promote equity of educational opportunity for students throughout Vermont. 4, to provide assistance when requested by individual school districts and local boards to help them meet statewide per pupil spending goals. In order to accomplish these goals, the Agency of Education must be properly staffed and resourced. VSBA desires to be a strong partner with the State Board of Education in overseeing Vermont's education system. VSBA believes that the state board should include an active school board member, an administrator, and a teacher. The governor should consult with the VSBA in the selection of the school board member. That is the end of the resolution.
Thank you for that, Sue.
Yeah, thanks, Sue. Appreciate that.
Mark Schauber, go ahead.
I had a question in relation to, I think it was the first item, the e-finance, whether that also includes a repeal of the universal chart of accounts, which is what at least some of our local legislators have been saying looks like it's coming.
I don't know, Mark, but I can look in the bill real quick while we continue.
All right, thank you.
I think it does not include that, Mark, but Sandra can verify.
I hope not.
Gaston, go ahead.
Hey, Neil, I have a question regarding one of the House bills that are listed at the end of the legislative report. So if you want me to wait until after everybody's done asking questions about these two particular miscellaneous ed bills, then I'll wait until then. So however you want to do it.
Yeah, why don't we do that? Just leave your hand up so that I know you've still got
Okay.
the question, but.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, and I'll go to Martine.
Hi, everybody. Would leadership mind if I weighed in on a few things? No? Okay.
Nope. Go ahead.
Thanks. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Martine Gulick. I'm on the Burlington School Board, and I'm also a state senator, and I'm on the Senate Education Committee. So I can weigh in on a few things that have been said tonight. And the first thing I'm going to say is just that we have a committee with 4 new people on it. So we're a very, inexperienced committee. And, we're sort of making it up as we go along. And I would say to all of you on this call right now, please don't hesitate to email me if there are issues that you would like us to look at in the committee, because we've certainly been open to hearing from folks and trying to do the work that we need to do for our constituents. So that would be my first thing. The second piece that I wanted to speak to just briefly around Flora's question with the construction aid task force. I think I'll try to speak to that a little bit, which is that as you may or may not know, that report is supposed to come out in October. I hope it does come out in October. This group of folks who are going to make up the task force are going to start meeting this summer. So the idea is to really be prepared when that report comes out in October to be able to hit the ground running. But also, one of the most important parts of this bill is to form a governance structure. We've been looking at the models that have come out of Rhode Island and Massachusetts, and they have a really organized governance structure that they use to make all kinds of decisions. And, this particular process is not going to be something that's just going to be like, let's patch up our schools. It's going to be a long-term, thorough, hopefully thoughtful way of dealing with lots of different construction issues. And my sense too, after last week, is that all of these construction issues are now butting up against PCB remediation. So that's becoming very complicated and complex. So it wouldn't surprise me if this committee, this task force, ends up doing a lot of that work as well. It just wouldn't surprise me. So there's a lot at play, and I think if we're going to follow those models that I think have been quite successful in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, it's just going to take some structure as opposed to just let's give a couple $1 million to this school and a couple $1 million here and there. So I think that's the idea, and it's also what the treasurer wanted to do, and we're working really closely with the treasurer. So we're sort of taking our cues from him. Yeah, Flor, did you want to?
Can I ask a question? Yeah, so do you mind putting a link to what the governance models are? And what the government, I don't totally grasp what the governance model is.
You know what I'll
it might
do?
be just my bias and having been involved in too much construction in Vermont before. So I feel like, why are we reinventing this?
Right. What
so
I can
apologize. I didn't mean any disrespect to you. I was just.
No worries. What I can do, Flor, is I can put a link to testimony that was heard in House Education. The gentleman from Rhode Island who came in and presented, he was amazing. And that is such a great presentation to watch. So I will send that link to you. It's really great. One other thing I wanted to mention, if y'all don't mind, was around the school safety bill. I know that Mr. Inners had asked a question, and I did just want to say one thing that's come up. We heard from Vermont Legal Aid last week or the week before, and they do have concerns about this this task force, which is supposed to look at, risks in schools, because they're not supposed to be at all punitive, but there's anecdotal evidence that says that they do become punitive. And Vermont Legal Aid was really concerned about kids who have special needs or might be on a 504 or have an IEP. For example, if they, if they tend to cry out or, say things that might sound violent because they have Asperger's or whatever, are they going to be targeted by this task force? Same with, BIPOC kids. Are they going to be targeted in ways that other kids might not be? So I did ask for anyone who's on a task force to have some bias training before they, start working with the task force, and also as an ongoing part of their training. So we'll see if that gets included in the bill, but I did want to mention that is a concern of some folks. It can become punitive even though it's not supposed to be.
And you're talking about the threat assessment team, right?
Yeah.
Martine, yeah.
All right.
Sorry, it's not a task force. It's a team.
Thank you for that information, Martina. I appreciate it. Colleen, is this for some of the stuff we've talked about already, or?
No, I think I'm like Gaston. I just have like one that I want to make a comment about, one of the new pieces of legislation that's being proposed.
Okay, so let me go to, so then why don't I do this? I'll go to Gaston and then I'll come right back to you.
Great. Thank you, Neil, for the time. What caught my attention is H202, an act related to traffic violations for illegally passing a school bus. There was a video that I saw. I don't know if it was ABC, NBC, or CBS, but it was it looked to be like a van that was passing a school bus while kids were crossing the road and narrowly missed one of the two children crossing the road. This is an issue, I think, not only nationally, but I believe statewide, or rather, I should say, that when we had our school bus, one of our two school bus drivers come to the school board and talk about behaviors on the bus, they said that this was an uncommon event, i.e. cars passing school buses with the red lights flashing. And so this week, actually tomorrow night, we're going to be spending some money to get those cameras on the outside that read license plates. So the reason why this got my attention is that if in fact this new bill takes what's currently on the books and makes it more of a penalty, right, with points or what have you, then I think this is something we should really try to support. And I don't know if it's still on the wall or off the wall or where it is, but I think this is important. And I really do not think that we're alone in seeing the number of cars that are passing our buses at a full stop with all red lights flashing. That's all I got to say. Over. Thank you.
Thanks. Sue, did you want to say anything about that, or?
I don't think there's been any testimony on that bill yet. So I think it is on the wall. Have you seen any testimony on that bill, Sandra?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Sandra, did you have something to add?
Do you want me to respond? I found the information about the shared school district data management system permanent suspension. So in the 2022 session, there was a pause until July 1 of 2023, and now the language says permanently suspended. There's no mention of the chart of accounts in the miscellaneous bill.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra.
Colleen, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll be brief on this one. My interest is in H416, and that's related to forgivable loan incentive programs, and I put a link in the chat to the language. I don't think this goes far enough to addressing the potential needs of the state for educators, and that's based on my experience of doing work in other states and seeing what other states are doing to create a more flexible pathway into a fully fledged teaching license. So I know a couple of people on the committee. I'll provide, some of my input that way, but I don't know if it's something that the VSBA wants to take up. Maybe you can talk about it in your legislative group if there's any interest. But I believe that the biggest challenges are not for the larger districts, like I'm Champlain Valley School District, and we don't have trouble hiring teachers, but we end up hiring teachers with 3 or 4 years of experience coming out of some of the more rural areas of the state. So, I know we're doing some, we're picking away some of your teachers who want to live in Chittenden County. So I do think this is an issue. It's an issue across the country. There are some really interesting dynamic options. And I'll just, one of the challenges with the loan forgiveness program, first of all, there's already a federal option for that for hard to fill areas. And most of the, a lot of people going into teaching might be career changers, and to be able to do it the way that Vermont has it structured, they have to leave their job essentially for almost full time many of them, depending on the program that they're going through, and pay into the system. So loan forgiveness is great, but they're also working with no income for a year. And what I'm seeing in other states is that they're changing the structure of teacher licensing so that there might be some intermediate between an instructor of record that's not licensed and a licensed teacher. But there's supervision, there's mentoring, there's all sorts of conditions around that. So I just think it's going to be a problem in Vermont. It's a problem elsewhere. And if there's going to be talk in the state about addressing educator shortage areas, we might want to push a little bit more on it to go a little bit farther. I said I'd be short. I'm sorry. It's
Oh, geez, Colleen, we're not going to let this slide. This can't happen again, really. So
yeah,
you're fine. Don't worry about it.
thank you.
Sue, I didn't know if you wanted to respond, but I guess the thought that was running through my head is for some of these bills, maybe that we have that weren't part of the discussion tonight, whether or not we've got a position or would have a position based on existing resolution, or might need to bring something before the legislative committee.
It really depends if we get asked, if they take up the bill and
Okay.
if we get asked to testify. So if there's not a resolution, then I will ask the legislative committee to meet.
Okay, perfect. Anything else, Mark Schauber?
What can we do as a VSBA to encourage committees to take up a bill that is on their wall, rather than kind of waiting for them to make a decision, but instead kind of getting out in front of it to advocate for them? Excuse me.
Well, we can certainly, I can certainly talk to the committee chair. If there's a specific bill that all of you think should be taken up, we can organize some emails to go to the committee members.
Is that a general or a specific question, Mark?
Well, there were two bills that were brought up just now that members had an interest in, and I thought this was a good opportunity to ask about that, and maybe those are bills that as a board we would like to ask be taken up. So I wasn't coming out with a specific bill in mind, but based on the questions that have just been asked.
So for the crossover deadline is next Friday for bills to get out of the policy committees. So there's not very much time for those particular bills. That doesn't mean that they couldn't get, tacked onto another bill or something later on, though.
I think though in that scenario, right, my assumption would be that we VSBA would need to do some work to determine whether or not we have an existing position relative to these bills. I mean, I know that there was some discussion and some board members were in favor of these things tonight, but as collectively as the body VSBA, I don't know off the top of my head whether or not we've got existing resolution that would cover any of these areas.
Yeah, I don't think we would have one on the one that Gaston was talking about, the school buses. And I'd have to look to see if we have one on the bill that Colleen was talking about. But
Right,
if you would like, if you're particularly interested in those two bills, I can certainly let the chair of House Ed know that. But we would have to look and see whether we need to pull the legislative committee together, which probably should happen first.
Right, because I'm trying to avoid the scenario of us saying, hey, we really want to see some movement on this thing, get taken off the wall, and then suddenly we're like, oh, wait, we don't know what our position is, right? And so I want to make sure that we're forward thinking about this and are doing our homework. And if that requires us to get the legislative committee together, I'm totally fine with that. But then let's just acknowledge the timeframes that we're working with right now, and we're running up against a deadline coming soon, right? Colleen?
Yeah, I could work with my local board to encourage a resolution or something like that. So I wasn't thinking about the deadline, and I wasn't sure if there had been any discussion related to the workforce development, but the deadline is important. time is precious.
Any other questions about the legislative update tonight? Martine, go ahead.
Not a question, just a comment. It's great to have a resolution and to go through formal channels, but I would say, Mark, you can email any member of any committee and just let them know how you feel. You'd be surprised how powerful personal testimony is on any issue. So if there's something that you want to advocate for, just don't hesitate writing to either all members of the committee or the chair or the vice chair. People read my sense is that legislators read their emails and take them to heart. So I would recommend that.
Thanks for that advice, Martine. And board members, if and when you do it, because I mean, I encourage you to do it, right? Just be mindful of what hat you're wearing when you do something like that, okay? That's my request. All right. Any other questions about the legislative update? All right, seeing none. And let's move into H314, firearms and deadly weapons on school property.
So this one I'm actually not going to go through a whole explanation of, because you should have listened to the Legislative Council's explanation. I sent the video to you last Friday and also again on Monday, I believe. So that has the explanation, and the bill is in your packet. It's a relatively simple concept, I think. Current law, there are two different circumstances under which a person could be prosecuted. It depends on what part of the school. In practice, if a person possesses a dangerous weapon in a school building or on a school bus, that's strictly prohibited. There's a couple of exceptions to that in the law. And other school grounds, such as parking lots and property around the school, possession is prohibited only if there's an intent to injure another person. And this proposal is to prohibit possession in general, regardless of intent to injure. So that's it in a nutshell.
Board members with thoughts. And not just general thoughts, particular to this bill. Michael, go ahead. And you're still muted.
The intent, I think, obviously, pretty obvious here. It might be helpful to note what the definition of a dangerous or deadly weapon is. It's extremely broad. I mean, I assume it would not be applied literally as written, because a car qualifies as a deadly weapon under the definition of the statute.
Okay. Sue, did you want to comment on that, or?
No, that was not covered in the discussion in the legislative committee. They didn't talk about a car being a deadly weapon.
I mean, basically, the definition says that anything that is capable of producing death or serious bodily injury is a dangerous or deadly weapon. It's an extremely broad definition. I mean, I assume it's not actually applied as written, but it's very broad.
Yep, point made. Mark Koenig, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, along those same lines, listening to the testimony, there were a number of things that just were not defined. Like, what is a school? Well, we're not really sure. Is the locked glove box or the locked trunk considered a locked weapon then? We're not sure. So there was confusion. And while I understand the basic want of keeping weapons away from schools, I know, is there a reason that this has been brought up? Was there a specific case that happened, or was there something that really went on? Because the big thing is the hunting season. If you've got a gun in the trunk, you're not going to know it unless it looks in. So I'm having a hard time figuring out how this is going to be enforced. If you're driving by, dropping your kid off, you have a rifle in your trunk that might be loaded and you've broken the law, but no one's going to know unless you've done something else that allows them to open up your trunk. So it somehow needs to be narrowed or better defined. Right now, it's just so broad that it's going to bring in a lot of complications, I think.
Thanks, Mark. And I'm going to turn it over to Flora because I think she has a partial answer to your first question.
Yeah, and I think our district might be guilty of this bill, but I think the clarification to make is that part of the reason for this bill is that you're putting administrators and teachers in the position of handling deadly weapons, right? So because this is not a law right now, it's a law if you are a threat or if you are inside the school, but the state police won't respond. So you're asking administrators if you have to search a vehicle, and even if the person discloses that there is a weapon, they now have to handle a weapon because the state police won't come in it because it's not a law right now. So I know that there was a lot of I hear through the entire testimony a lot of concern about hunting season, but most hunters that are going with their children in the car are following all of the requirements that they're as they're unloaded, they're locked. They wouldn't be, and you wouldn't be asking somebody, you wouldn't be searching a car without suspicion. So it's basically being able to respond to not necessarily a threat, but to respond to a school situation where you would be putting people that are not qualified and producing a lot of stress in your administrators that are already under, overburdened. And I know that this is not a problem in urban schools, but it is a problem in rural schools because the police in Montpelier or in Burlington will come to the school, but they won't come to the rural schools, the state police, unless it's a law. And that's what they're trying to do. So it's, yeah.
Before, Mark Koenig.
This just seems like it would be better structured by changing the rule that the state police operate under rather than creating an overly broad statement that schools have to. And I understand the issue. It's outside of ours, but it seems like the police saying, well, we can't do it because you don't have a law. It seems like it'd be a little easier for the state police to just change their definition of how they do things rather than washing their hands of something and saying, you've got to force us to come out and do our job.
But it's you would have to change federal law, which is a lot harder.
I think the issue is that they don't see an intent to harm anyone. So that's why they're not coming, because it's only illegal on school property that's like the parking lot or school property that's not in the school or in a school bus if there's an intent to injure another person.
So Sue, just for clarification for this evening, were we hoping to get to a VSBA position on this bill?
Yes, I've been asked to provide that.
Okay. So that is the frame of mind, folks, that we should be looking at here as we have our discussion and our debate, is that we're driving to a position on this bill. Would some further discussion be helpful for folks in getting to a position on the bill? If it looks like discussion isn't necessary, and I think the next thing I'm looking for is a motion from somebody.
Well, I guess I'll move to support even if it doesn't win, but I'll move to support the bill.
I'll
Okay.
second.
Seconded by Mark Schauber. Does a motion and a second generate any discussion? Mark Koenig, go ahead.
I'll be in support of it. I like the general idea. I just have a feeling that we are going to be faced with unintended consequences coming down the road. But we can deal with that when they come.
Thanks. David Chandler, go ahead.
So I find myself in the same position as Mark. I feel very strongly that we do need better gun control. But at the same time, loosey-goosey language sometimes, and I shouldn't say loosey-goosey, but the language has got to be pretty precise. We are in a hunting culture, and I know Flora mentioned that. And so there are circumstances that need to be accommodated, and I don't have a clear sense that they're being accommodated here. So I agree with Mark.
Thank you, David. Barbara, go ahead.
Yes, I just have I guess a procedural question since I'm so new here. I'm just observing mostly, but if we decide in a meeting such as this that we want to support a bill, do we also have a process to give input in committee? I know we give input in committee about it. Can we get to, is it the legislative committee or is it the whole board who would maybe make suggestions on how we would like to change it? I mean, specifically, that would really help the drafters. Like, this is too vague. Why don't you say such and such? You know, the way we would do if we were, probably you do, Sue, when you're working on a bill with somebody. So that my question is, what would we do if we say, yes, we like it, but we want X, Y, Z to change? What's the procedure for us to do that?
So the procedure would be basically the process that we're going through right now. I would argue that because we are in a meeting of the full board right now, that we can take that up this evening and come to those positions versus, punting it and saying that we're going to take it up in the legislative committee. We've got the opportunity tonight. I think we can have continued discussion on it. There's a motion and a second. We're discussing that motion right now. If through the course of that discussion, people raise, and I get a general sense that we've got sort of consensus around, we need to improve the vagueness of the bill. There are other areas that need to be improved. Certainly can turn those over to Sue, that she can take that with her for testimony back to the committee on this bill based on the discussion that we had here this evening. But what I am unfortunately going to do at this moment in time, though, is I'm going to turn the meeting over to Flora. So unfortunately, it's Flora's motion, and now she has to chair the remainder of the meeting. You all are in extremely capable hands, but I do need to duck out for my own board meeting. So boards.
Good luck, Neil.
Got this.
Thank you, Neil.
Carrying us through. Okay, so Bart. You were next, according to my little thing here.
Okay, thank you. So, yeah, I think I have a hard time supporting this based on the way it's currently written. I guess I think there's just, it's very vague. As I understand it, as I interpret it, it sounds like even if I'm passing through the woods on, on my way to hunt on a school property, it sounds like I would be subject to violating this law. I do have issues because we live in a big hunting community. If the gun is in a locked gun rack and unloaded, it sounds like it would be a violation under this new rule, and I don't think that's currently an issue under existing legislation, if I understand it correctly. So I have a hard time based on how this is currently written, and I think there's also I think probably better definitions around what is a school. Is this subjected to our universities and colleges? It seems very broad in many regards.
Thank you, Brett. Mark? Okay, Kaufman.
I would propose a slight amendment to the motion that we do provide support with enhanced clarification and definitions.
Thank you, Mark. That makes sense. Mark Shelburne, Mark B.
Thanks, Laura. So now three things. Mark Kaufman, did you have specific? I more than happy to have an amendment. That was going to be one of my suggestions, is that we come up with some language or something specific that we want to let Sue know we'd like to have addressed. So do you have anything specific? Before you answer that, I just want to let Barbara know that the purpose of the executive committee, which this is the first year that the legislative committee, and the first year we've had it, is to take positions when Sue's asked to testify and the board as a whole isn't going to be coming together, and there isn't a resolution. So it gives her an opportunity to get input from all the regions of the VSBA when she can't have the whole board.
Mark, is that an old hand or a new hand? You have some language that you want?
I apologize. I do not have specific language in mind at this instant. I would prefer to speak with counsel and perhaps the legislative, when I say the legislative committee, our local legislators on the education committee about their feelings on how the language could be amended. Again, I have conceptual support for this, strong support, but I understand and agree with some of the concerns regarding the very vague definitions.
Thank you, Mark. Colleen? You're muted, Colleen. Yeah.
Sorry. Thank you. In the chat, I provided a link to a weapons policy for the Champlain Valley School District, and our boards, 5 towns, have deliberated the weapons policy for many years, and it was precipitated by a silly incident where, because we had the weapons policy was related to federal legislation going back to the 1990s, and I forget what the particular act was. So I thought every school already had weapons policies, but we had a student bring in a knife in a jar of peanut butter and a bag of bread, and because it was a knife, all of a sudden this 8-year-old had to go before the school board on a weapons policy violation. It was kind of silly, but it just kind of made the point of, okay, we need to be thinking about the families who, drop their kids off in the truck and there's a gun rack in the back, and the mom who's trying to help their kid be self-sufficient and packing peanut butter and bread in a butter knife, so what's the length of the knife and so forth. And so we deliberated quite a bit around the word intent, but we played with definitions. We had attorneys look at it. So I'm just sharing what we did. And I'm really not clear what this, and I guess I'm missing something. I thought there already were weapons policies that were required by federal legislation, but maybe not.
Yes, there are, but this bill doesn't have anything to do with requiring a weapons policy.
Okay, but it's guns on school property or weapons on school property. Isn't that the same?
It's the same, yeah, it's the same.
I'm just not sure what
it doesn't cover what needs to be in a policy.
Okay.
So question before Michael, I see your hand, and Mark too. So your time, when are you asked to testify on this? When is because I think what we should do is try to summarize. I completely trust Sue to sort of get the gist of what we're trying to say. And my feeling is that people are supportive of, of being strong about gun control in the schools without penalizing our hunting community and being too vague is what I'm hearing from from
Can
you
I just
guys.
mention that there's a motion on the floor and there's not a second?
What do you mean?
Yeah, I seconded
Mark-
it.
Mark Schauber seconded it.
And that- Yeah,
Thank you so much.
okay. Yeah, sorry. I'm like, what do you mean?
So the current situation is that I was asked to testify. I wasn't available at the time to testify that they needed me because I was already scheduled for testimony in another committee. And then I asked the committee chair if they, whether he was going to ask me to come at another time because I did not get an immediate request to come again. And he said that this bill is not going to make crossover, but he would still like us to know our position on it. I'm thinking that there's a possibility that it could be, tacked onto something else or something like that. So I don't have a specific date that I'm have to testify on it.
Okay, thank you, Sue. That's helpful. Michael Inners?
Yeah, I mean, the difference between this bill and a policy requirement is that the policy only really has reach to people in the school community one way or another, whereas this makes it a law enforcement matter. It's a crime, right?
Exactly.
And I do understand that it's the tools we have right now, and somebody is being somewhat threatening, but not actively harming people on school grounds because are weak. And I'm surprised actually the state police won't respond in those situations because it seems they should. But the butter knife type situation, that kind of stuff comes up more often than you might think, right? And I'm a little worried that the language as currently phrased puts us in that kind of situation where we would have basically ridiculous consequences in situations that aren't in fact threatening. So I don't oppose the idea of the bill. I just wonder if this is the right way to get where we want to be, which is to get law enforcement to intervene when there are bad situations.
Thanks, Michael. Mark?
I want to make sure that my thinking is correct on this. The primary purpose of this bill is to change incidents from being an administrative process to a law enforcement process. Is that my understanding that generally correctly?
I don't think so. It's currently a law enforcement process. It's just a different standard depending on whether the gun is or the deadly weapon is in the school, on a school bus versus whether it's on school property. And this would make it the same standard wherever it would be because it would remove the intent to injure someone or the intent to harm someone.
Okay,
But
so maybe I
it's
misworded it.
It's currently criminal already.
It is. It's just
It
now
allows
extended.
law enforcement to respond, regardless of whether it's in the school or just on school property.
Right.
Right now is bus or school or the school. This will allow it to be on the school. So in the parking lot, right? In the grounds, basically. So you're buying, a arm at the stand, for example, at the sports event. It would just be more comprehensive. So right now you have different sections in the school where you can. Colleen, go ahead. Oh, Mark, you were next. Yeah, are you done?
Just one other thing, I was wondering whether we could request a change from a weapon having to be locked in a case to just being locked in general, which would include a gun rack.
So the requirement for it to be locked, that's in federal law. That is not in state law, but that, I mean, you could talk about
The case?
state law consistent with federal law, but it's not in state law right now or in the bill.
But I thought this bill was asking for it to be required that it be locked in a case.
I don't believe so.
That was what I got from the testimony.
No, the testimony, that part of the testimony was talking about what federal law requires. There's a gun-free School Zones Act, and that was talking about that's a federal law, and it was talking about that federal law. And what the Legislative Council said was that for federal laws, the U.S. attorney needs to prosecute them in federal court. For a state law, the state's attorney prosecutes them in state court, and that there are more states' attorneys, and that this would not necessarily rise to the top of a U.S. attorney's caseload. So it's two separate avenues for a criminal conviction.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Hey, Colleen.
Yeah, I just posted in the chats our definition for school property, and any policies that we have in our district, the duty of care is extended beyond the school building. It always has included any grounds around the school, parking lot, fields, buses, transportation, and including events that occur in other locations. So in our district, when we talk about duty of care, it's, when a young person is within our school district's responsibility, we consider that the extent. Not to raise another issue, but this has made it really problematic related to like cyberbullying and so forth. Does school property include the internet? And that's one of the things that we're struggling with. So, yeah,
we have similar things, Colleen, and I think a lot of our districts have that on policy, but it is not enforceable by law. Our policies are not enforceable by law in parking lot. So that, and I don't want to drag this conversation really long after Neil promised that we could go out. So this is more about making this a law. So we're not trying to make it a policy, right?
But policy, it has within our district, it operates as law, but we're talking about something different because it's just our district versus the state. But, we have to include police in our discussions.
I think I can help clear this up a little bit. You as a school district don't have the ability to prosecute someone who violates your policy. You do if they're a student, they're under your jurisdiction, but a member of the public, you don't have that ability. You need to have a law that would allow that to happen for them to be criminally liable.
Yeah, of course, I'm, all in support of safety, but I guess my 2 cents is whatever they have written there, based on my own experience of dealing with this weapons policy over a number of years, is that it takes time to flesh it out, and what's being presented does not feel ripe yet. I think there are unintended consequences embedded in it, and it just needs a little more fleshing out. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah. Totally. Gaston?
Yeah, so I wonder if someone would clarify for me that under 404, section 40004A, where it talks about no person shall knowingly possess a firearm or whatever, and then the first offense is imprisonment for not more than 1 year and fine no more than $1,000. So if you have somebody who has, heretofore been, a student in a school and decide something happens and they decide to bring a weapon to school, and luckily somebody is able to intervene, does that mean the judge must, because it's their first offense, only imprison them for 1 year, when in fact they ought maybe be in prison for longer, right? I don't understand. I don't understand that part Over.
Sue, I don't think that was, I don't know. I don't know how to respond to that. Yeah. Sorry, I guess I don't have an answer.
I think
for-
it's more of a comment than a question.
A comment. Okay, okay.
Well, it is and it isn't. I mean, I guess if you're going to have a rule about no weapons on a school property, regardless of how you define that, if somebody does bring a weapon on, now for their first offense, it's 1 year in prison, when in fact, shouldn't it be more? I guess I don't know. Over. Maybe it is just a comment. Over.
Mark.
Well, it actually says no more than. So the judge is going to be able to look, if it gets to a court, the judge will be able to look at it and say, oh, it's the butter knife issue. And, we're going to say, don't do it again. If it's something serious, then for the first offense, you have up to a year and the fine. So it could be anything from 0 to 365 days. And if they have real concerns, a decent prosecutor is going to find other violations to slap onto that to build the case. It's not going to be just because they found a gun in a trunk.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Over.
Amy.
Thank you, Mark K. That's exactly what I was going to say, is that I think if there's a person who forgets that they went hunting the day before and is bringing their child to school and it's in a rack or whatever, that would be hopefully treated differently than a person who brings a gun with some sort of intent. And that the prosecutor would then add a few more charges onto whatever's happening. So thank you.
Michael?
Just the only point is that this bill removes the intent standard from the language. So that's perhaps maybe where my issue is.
So I guess maybe we should vote, and should we change the motion a little bit to say that we are in support of the bill with concern of the vagueness of the language? And what was there was one more thing, hold on. And
I think what I heard was that the definitions need work and it needs more fleshing out so that unintended consequences, so that it doesn't have unintended consequences.
Yeah. Do you have that?
Paul?
Yes, Mark, is that you?
Okay, so I have a motion on the floor and then I have an amendment on the floor. The amendment says Mark Hoffman proposed an amendment that we support the bill with more clarification. And that was seconded by Mark Schaber. Do you want to vote on the amendment and then go back and vote on the?
I was just trying to make sure that the amendment sort of showed what we were talking to, if the person that did the amendment is okay with that. I just want to make sure that we are clear on that amendment.
So Mark Kaufman, are you okay with that motion or would you like to change it?
That's fine.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Okay, Mark Schubert, do you have, and you're okay with that because you second that, Mark?
Yeah. I had a quick question for Sue or Tandra. Has this gone in front of the House Judiciary yet? Because it will have to.
It would have to, yeah. It has not. It hasn't even gotten voted out of House Ed, and Chair Conlon said he doesn't think it's going to make crossover.
So it's going to get a lot of work done in Judiciary, I'm sure.
Are people okay if we call the vote? Okay, all those in favor of the motion as stated by Mark Kaufman, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Yes, see one.
Can I just clarify, they're voting on the amendment, correct? Not the original motion?
Yes, on the amendment.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we have everybody. I just don't see Barbara or Martine. Okay.
I think Martine was recusing herself from this.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
And I don't see Barbara. Okay. So anybody opposed, just in case Barbara is there? And one, I think David, Suzanne, and let me see, how many opposed to it? Colleen, is that you? Two? No, it's just old. Okay, so we have 2 opposed. Okay.
Martine, it's Suzanne. My hand I tried to take down. I approved the amendment.
Oh, okay. Hi, Suzanne. All right. Okay, thank you. Yeah, just on the lower part.
So is
you-
the majority vote yes with 1 abstain and 2 opposed? Is that correct?
It's 1 opposed.
1 opposed.
Oh, 1 opposed. Okay.
And I guess 1 abstain because Barbara is not here or the rest.
Martine abstained as well.
Oh, Martine abstained. Okay. Okay, so you're there, Martine. Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Did 1 other oppose or abstain?
No, no.
Okay, all right.
Okay, Jim, do you have a clarifying question before we vote on?
Yeah, it's just one thing I find tough is, I agree with the fact that the language needs work and unintended consequences need to be taken care of. But if that's what we're just kind of presenting, then we're voting on something, where we don't know what we're voting on because we're just saying we want to vote on something else. So it's a little bit awkward to then say that, oh, we approve it as long as you change it. Well, what they change it to may not be something we want to approve,
Yeah, but I think what we are doing is just giving guidance to Sue. I see it as kind of a resolution, right? Like Sue is hearing all of the discussion of that we're having. I think there's general agreement among the
Well, I
board
agree that
we
it's helpful, hopefully, for Sue to be able to, present it as, conceptually, but it needs a lot of work. But that's sort of different than then it's awkward to vote for, I'm for it when they change it, when we don't know what they're going to change it to. But, that tends to be a problem, sort of a difficulty with, it's not like we, with universal school meals, we took a position that we're all for it as long as they find another funding source. And, that, then that gets presented as we're all for it, it's.
Yeah, and I guess one of the things that I can't get off my mind is that most school children die from firearms, right?
Yeah,
So,
I mean, firearms
so
control
yeah.
getting a lot better. I'm good with. I'm uncomfortable not knowing what they're going to end up. In a way, I would say our position is we don't feel comfortable with it as it is because we don't think it's written well enough.
Yeah. Okay. So as process, I would just suggest that we table the motion and we approve the amendment, right? Or do we want to vote on the motion?
Can you
as
do that?
amended? Sure. Go ahead, Colleen.
Could we just postpone this to another date? I mean, Sue, we've had the conversation and I think we've heard different issues. Can we just postpone it? I mean, tabling it, you'd have to vote it out of, some kind of formal, get it back on an agenda, but we could postpone it and it could come up again.
You could postpone until your next board meeting. Postpone to a certain date.
And would you have enough guidance with what we gave you, Sue? Because you would have to be there sooner.
Well,
So-
I think what I would say is that you weren't able to, that you didn't pass a motion supporting it, that there was discussion about the lack of clarity in the definitions, and that there needed to be more fleshing out of the bill so that so that it doesn't cause unintended consequences. And so the board was not able to come to a final position on the bill, something like that.
I like that.
Okay. Michael, and then Mark.
The amendment replaces the original motion, so the amendment's what we have.
Yeah.
We have now.
Yeah.
So it's really, the only concern I have about taking no action at all is that I think by our schedule, our next board meeting will be well after the time where our input will matter. If I understand the legislative calendar.
Well, the legislature is probably going to go until at least the first or second week in May, and your next meeting is April 12th.
So we will at least have some opportunity, because we could, postponing it is certainly possible. If it would still matter at that time.
I think that if I gave testimony to the effect of, what I just said a few minutes ago, I think that would be providing input on the bill without saying we support it or we oppose it. And it could help to shape the bill if it does get taken up again.
Thank you, Sue. Mark?
I'd personally be more
frozen, Mark?
comfortable.
Right there.
Yep, I'm unmuted, right? Yeah. Be more comfortable taking a vote on this and giving Sue the ability to say, yeah, we support the bill, but we want this changed. That would be the tack that I would take.
So I could propose that we vote on the motion as amended by Mark, which is sort of what we just did. We voted in the amendment, but we can vote on the motion to support the bill as amended. Is that okay? Okay. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay, 13 yeses. And anybody opposed, please lower your hands if. Anybody opposed? I see one. David, am I missing somebody? Jim, yeah. Okay, any abstain? So we have 2 no's, any abstain? Okay. Martine, thank you, Martine. All right. So moving into the strategic plan monitoring report.
All right.
Are there any highlights? Sue? Yeah.
Yeah, there were a few things that I wanted to mention. Need to get there in my packet. Okay. So KR 1.1.1 is a key result that by December 31, 2025, we want to increase the number of annual communications between VSBA regional representatives, which is all of you, and your local school board members in your region to double the baseline level of FY23 as measured by a communication tracking tool. We wanted to let you know under the activities in progress for this one that the regional contact shared spreadsheet has been updated as of February 28th. And the new board member information is going to be updated in that document weekly after town meeting day. Carrie works on that as she gets the new board members' names and contact information. There's also in there a template email for all of you to use as a starting point of an email to new board members in your region. So if you would please take a look at that, and I would say you need to probably wait a couple weeks before you send out an email to the new board members in order to give Carrie time to get the new board members in there. Carrie, do you want to comment on that all as to how long they should wait in order to make sure that you've got the new board members in there?
Sure. As I get them in, I'll be updating them. Usually I get them from the administrative assistants within the first 2 to 3 weeks after town meeting day, after a few prodding sometimes, but so yeah, check back in, like maybe even weekly. I will note the new board members in there, so you can see who the new ones are, and you can follow the information from there.
And we would ask that you please, we always ask this anyway, that when you do send a communication, if you could copy Neil and me, and what I'll do is make Carrie aware of that communication, and she's going to be keeping track of it so that we get a baseline for the level of communication that's happening, so that we can measure it and measure its increase in between now and December 31, 2025. The next one is KR 1.1.2, the annual conference. We just wanted to let you know that we convened an annual conference advisory committee meeting on March 2nd to gather suggestions for improving the annual conference, increasing participation, and discussing marketing strategies. The participants included those who served on the governance standard task force. And also there was one person who had stepped off of the task force. So we pulled in another person from that region, which was Carrie Amadon from the Wyndham Southeast Supervisory Union. She's on the Vernon School Board. So there's information about what their discussions included in the strategic plan monitoring report, and they gave a lot of really great insight. And we think it's a good strategy to be consulting with our members about what they want to see at annual conference. KR 1.1.4, the weekly emails. We've started running a monthly poll in those related to school board's work in the weekly emails. And our goal is really to provide something that's interactive in the email that helps us get to know our audience better, keep them engaged, and increase the open rates of the weekly email. KR 1.2.3 is collaboration and leadership, maintaining strong relationships with our education partners, and wanted to know that tomorrow Phil is presenting to the Vermont Superintendent's Leadership Academy on the importance and opportunities of superintendent evaluation, and both Phil and Sandra have presented to that Leadership Academy several times in the last year. KR 2.1.2, new board members. Wanted to make sure you know that we have scheduled May 8th and May 15th as webinars for new board members. These are free webinars for new board members, and we hope that you will highly encourage anyone who's been newly elected to your boards to participate in those. Getting toward the end here, KR 2.2.1 is educational equity. Wanted to make sure that you know that on February 2nd, we held a webinar with national experts Tricia Lebach and Ivan Lorenzen, who's from Montana, on new research about how boards can support improving achievement for all students while at the same time closing gaps. And 87 people registered for that webinar. There were 36 who attended live, but everyone who registered got a link to the webinar and all the materials. And of course, they are available under webinar archives on our website as well. And we have some quotes from the evaluation that are listed there in your report. And lastly is KR 3.3.3, which is advocate for educational equity, resources and supports. And as we discussed earlier when we were talking about the PCB report, Neil provided testimony on February 28th to the House and Senate Education Committees opposing the proposed 80-20 cost share proposal for the PCB mitigation and remediation costs and advocating for full funding by the state. And we see this as an equity issue as capacity of districts to raise that 20% cost share varies widely throughout the state. So that is the end of my highlights from the strategic plan monitoring report. Highly encourage you to read the whole thing when we send it to you. It's got a lot of good information in it.
Thank you, Sue. Any questions on the strategic monitoring report or for Sue and her team? Okay, well, thank you. So I love the format of this report. It gives me an insight. It gives us all an insight of what's happening. So it's really helpful. So with that, we can move into the consent agenda. And I'm wondering if I could have a motion for the minutes, the February minutes.
Temperature is 26 degrees, 1905.
So moved.
I'll second. This is Gaston.
Okay, who moved it? Sorry, I was paying attention to
Yeah,
that
who
other
was the
voice.
motion?
Bart, go ahead. So Bart and second by Gaston, right? Right. Any discussion, any changes on those minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. I think we have, yeah, unanimously approval of the minutes. And new business. I'm not even going to call the no votes or abstain since we got everybody. And I see all the hands like coming up now. So lower your hand. Anything under new business from board members?
I think I
congratulations,
thought I saw
Suzanne.
Suzanne had her hand raised. No,
Suzanne?
No, I was trying to put it down and it just wouldn't go down.
Oh, okay. No worries. Okay, well, seeing none, that concludes the new business too. Congratulations, everybody, for passing the ones that we're voting now, and good luck reorganizing and getting everything ready as you start the year. And we have one more little thing to do, and I'm going to pass this to Carrie. You ready, Carrie? So Phil, so you want to go first? Go ahead.
you can go first, Flora. That's okay.
But so Phil, this is for you, and everybody can put their own reactions if they want. But we're gonna miss you and thank you for all you have done for us. You definitely have brought us, to levels that we hadn't thought before, and you have really, I don't know, you have made us all better just by being our mentor and our friend, and we're gonna miss you. But we wish you the best, and we understand. And come visit.
Thanks, Flora.
Sue?
Yeah, and I will add on to Flora's comments. We will miss you very much, Phil. We've learned so much from you, and you've connected us with so many different people throughout the country that have so much knowledge about school governance. So, we're very sad that you're leaving. You've helped a lot of our boards immensely. And we know you're going to do the same thing in Idaho. And we hope that we'll, continue to connect with you. And I'm sure that we will do that. So we just wish you safe travels and happiness in your new home.
Thank you, Sue.
And it would be a standing ovation if we were all in person, but we're not there. So thank you, Phil. Thank you.
I'll
Stay in
miss
touch.
you. It's been very wonderful working with you, Phil.
Thanks, Carrie.
And if there's any other board member that wants to express, please go ahead. Or, okay. But
Well, I'd just like to say that Phil came into the Champlain Valley School District just at the right time for our board, our district, and we are all very grateful for Phil's skills and demeanor and helping guide us along. So thank you very much, Phil, not just from the VSBA board, but from our individual Champlain Valley School District board. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen.
There's a bunch of messages in the chat too.
Yeah, it's sweet. My biggest regret is leaving so soon. But that's life sometimes, I guess.
You're gonna do great things. So bring Idaho back.
Yeah. I
Come
don't know.
visit. I know you have your work cut out for you, but it is 7:10, and with the help of Mr. Neal today, we can go have dinner with our families a little earlier because we had to not table part of our meeting. So thank you, everybody, for being here. I'll be looking for a motion to adjourn. And again, thank you, Phil, for all your contributions.
Thank you to each of you.
A motion to adjourn.
So
I'll make
moved.
that motion to adjourn. Thank you, Tara. Second by Jim. All those in favor, please leave.
Nobody wants to adjourn because it means saying goodbye to Phil.
Don't wanna adjourn because we.
Thank you, Phil.